On behalf of Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, and all my colleagues at Teamwork Arts, welcome back to a new season of JLF's Brave New World, beamed for the first time since the lockdown straight from Diggy Palace in Jaipur, from where the festival originated 13 years ago. We'd like to thank the Diggy family for their continued support of the festival. I can tell you just how delighted we are today to be able to broadcast directly from Jaipur. Our magazine partner for this series is The Week, Journalism with a Human Touch. And in case any of you missed our earlier session today, Raya, Krishna Deva Raya of Vijayanagara, Srinivas Reddy in conversation with Manu S. Pillai, you can catch this on YouTube or our Facebook platform. Our second session today to commemorate Indian Navy Day 2020 is Operation X, the war that changed the Indian subcontinent. Sandeep Unnithan and Commodore A.W. Chowdhury from Bangladesh in conversation with Commodore Srikant Kesnur from the Indian Navy with opening remarks by Vikram Doraiswami, the High Commissioner of India to Bangladesh. Commemorating the anniversary of the 1971 war between East and West Pakistan, Operation X, written by Captain M.N.R. Samant, who unfortunately is passed over, and Sandeep Unnithan, is the untold story behind one of the world's largest covert naval wars. Naval Commando Operation X was the directorate of the Naval Intelligence's code for a series of complicated guerrilla operations directed against the maritime jugular of the Pakistan Army in erstwhile East Pakistan. These innovative sabotage missions, executed with specially trained East Bengali college students, were part of India's assistance to the Mukti Bahini guerrillas in the months preceding the 1971 Indo-Pakistan War. NCOX used the largest number of maritime saboteurs in the history of modern naval warfare to achieve its objectives. Author Sandeep Unnithan, executive editor of India Today, has also written the book Black Tornado. Commodore Abdul Wahid Chowdhury of the Bangladeshi Navy was the chief of Operation Jackpot, one of the three operations undertaken by the Bengal Mukti Bahini along with the Indian government. In a conversation with naval historian Commodore Srikant Kesnur, they discuss the inner world of this conflict and its many intricacies. Sandeep Unnithan is executive editor with India Today magazine, which he writes on national security issues. He has authored Black Tornado, The Sieges of Mumbai 2611, and about the military aspect of the November 26, 2008 attacks. The book was adapted as the web series State of Siege. His second book, Operation X, co-authored with Captain M.N.R. Samant, released in August 2019, describes a covert naval war in the run-up to the 1971 liberation of Bangladesh. Commodore A.W. Chowdhury is a senior naval officer of the Bangladesh Navy who retired in January 1997. He's a qualified submariner and a long gunnery specialist. He led Operation Jackpot at Chittagong port and cut the lifeline of Pakistani forces by sinking ships in the Karnapuli River. Commodore Chowdhury is widely known as a pioneer war hero of Bangladesh and for being the first to lead his team from France and join the war from abroad. Commodore Srikant Kesnur, an alumni of the National Defense Academy, is a serving naval officer with more than 34 years. He has commanded two frontline warships, served as faculty in prestigious military institutions, and done a diplomatic tenure in East Africa. Deeply interested in naval and maritime history, he has been chief editor, lead writer of 9 books and several monographs journals produced by the Indian Navy. Please do remember to ask questions and comment by typing it into the comment section below, and we will ask these of our speakers today. In case any of you drop off due to bandwidth issues, you can find us on our Facebook and YouTube channels. Ladies and gentlemen, on the occasion of the Indian Navy Day 2020, we're honored to have with us His Excellency Vikram Doraiswami, High Commissioner of India to Bangladesh. Vikram Doraiswami became Ambassador of India to Uzbekistan in October 2014, before being assigned as India's ambassador to the Republic of Korea in April 2015. Thereafter serving as head of division for Bangladesh and Myanmar And in April 2019, he was tasked with setting up a new division at the Ministry of External Affairs on the Indo-Pacific region. He is currently the High Commissioner of India to Bangladesh. High Commissioner, we're absolutely delighted to have you on this very special occasion to say a few words to all our people listening in. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Sanjoy. And it's a great pleasure to be at the JLF this year virtually. I have in the past had the great good fortune to come as a visitor to the JLF, and I'm delighted to see that pandemic or no pandemic, the JLF continues with the same pioneering spirit of bringing ideas to the world of readers and to the world of people interested in new and interesting avenues of discussion. So thank you for doing this, and thank you particularly for giving us an opportunity to bring to front and center something that ought to be of great interest to every historian, every person interested in strategy and strategic history, every naval officer, and everybody in our subcontinent. Why I say this is because the 3rd and 4th of December are red letter days in the history of the subcontinent. The transformation of what had become a steady series of guerrilla conflicts into full-on, full-fledged battle, the battle that led to the liberation of Bangladesh, is a central marker in the history of the South Asian region. And so the foundation of Bangladesh, the liberation of Bangladesh, is a very important fact in the way we look at our region and in the way we remember our history. So that, of course, is most fitting that we do this on the day that the conflict started, on a day that is also Indian Navy Day, and that we start this conversation with a conversation about a history that is only now being told, thanks to the excellent work by Sandeep Unnithan in his wonderful book, Operation X, which I urge those who have not read it to go out there and buy it, because it is a cracker of a read, to Captain Samant, who is unfortunately no longer with us, and of course, to the brave heroes of the Bangladesh Navy, none more so than Commodore Chowdhury, who's with us today. It's a great honor to see him here, and other Mukti Jodhas who, in the exact meaning of that word, were warriors for freedom, warriors for liberation. I think, therefore, the significance of the day is obviously well made, and you've made that point. A second thing that is important to remember is that history doesn't pass itself on. History must be written, recorded, and continued by people who are interested in understanding what happened in the past. That is relevant because the history of Bangladesh, the history of the liberation of Bangladesh, is central to where Bangladesh and India, and indeed our region, go from here. The kind of Bangladesh that we see, the kind of Bangladesh that the Bangladeshi people want to see, and the kind of region that we want to have, all take their origin from 1971. So 1971, like 1947, is a central landmark in the history of the region. And your conversation today at the JLF with this distinguished panel is critical to understanding and passing on knowledge of what 71 is and why it should be important to all of us. A third point I wanted to make is the value that we get from recalling the history of men and women who contributed to the liberation of Bangladesh, because it is so much a people's story in Bangladesh. We tend often in India to look at it as an India-Pakistan conflict, which it was, of course, but from December 1971. It was not from March 1971 and onwards, when the people of then East Pakistan, the Bangladeshi people, had stood up for their rights, for what was, in essence, their just demand for a fair share of political power and an economic power in what was their own country. The denial of these rights and the mass oppression unleashed upon them, which, quite frankly, in any other time, in any other age, would have been called genocide, is the starting point of this history. So understanding that and taking that forward, recognizing that this is a people's struggle of the Bangladeshi people to begin with, is critical in getting this picture correct. We in India sometimes need to recall that because obviously from our perspective, it's easy to see it as an India-Pakistan conflict because it has been an enduring part of our troubled history with Pakistan since 1947, that there have been all these conflicts. But 1971 should and must be remembered primarily as a conflict about Bangladesh. In other words, a conflict that was led, sustained, and fought first and foremost by the Bangladeshi people. So, the success of that war needs to be remembered as a people struggle in which we as India were honored to be able to have a role in bringing that conflict to an early and successful conclusion. My last point, and something that I would encourage others who may be so interested, there are literally hundreds of these stories out there. Stories of sailors, airmen, soldiers, journalists, civilian agitators, people who got out there, put their lives on the line because it was pretty easy between March 1971 and December 1971 to get shot for your pains. People who believed in what Bengali culture and a composite Bengali culture was all about. Those people's stories are still out there to be told. It's 50 years since that deeply bloody conflict took place. It's not a moment too soon. So to those who may be interested, Sandeep offers a very good role model for how this can be done, but we can't expect Sandeep to write every story that there is out there. It is important for us to be able to go out there, meet the Commodore Chowdhurys of Bangladesh, meet others who have contributed so much to such an important moment in our history. So to that, I urge your audience, members of the public who are interested in history in our region, to get out there, find the stories, bring these things out. Because without that, there is no tomorrow that cannot be built on the past that we created together in 1971. So thank you for having me on, Sanjoy. Thank you to your panelists, to Sandeep, to Commodore Srikant Kesnur. Great to know that there is a naval historian out there writing all these stories. And of course, most of all, to Commodore Chowdhury. It's a great honor to see you here. And I look forward to being able to interact over the year ahead as we celebrate 50 years of liberation in Bangladesh. And for us to be able to be part of those celebrations will always be an honor. Thank you all, and have a great evening of discussions.
Thank you, High Commissioner. Thank you for joining us and placing today in perspective. Absolutely 50 years since the battle, the liberation of Bangladesh, and we're delighted that you were able to join us today. Ladies and gentlemen, Operation X, the war that changed the Indian subcontinent. Sandeep Unnithan and Commodore A.W. Chowdhury in conversation with Commodore Srikant Kesnur. Commodore Kesnur, over to you.
Thanks, Sanjay. Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's wonderful being with all of you today. And on behalf of my co-panelists, I'd like to thank JLF Brave New World for giving us this opportunity. It's a landmark date, as has been pointed out, at the start of commemoration of 50 years of the 71 war. Also the Navy Day. We couldn't have asked for a better date, a better time, and a more opportune movement than to discuss one of the most seminal books of the war, and that is Operation X by Sandeep Unnithan. And I'm delighted to be conversing with him and Commodore Chowdhury about the book. So let me dig into it straight away since the introductions have been made. Let me come to Sandeep. Sandeep, you are a journalist, you're an author, so you look at things through a very contemporary lens, but you're also a history student and you are a Navy kid. So I'd like you to put on all those hats together and tell our listeners how this book happened, and also along with that, why this book is important. In a sense, what is the event that you're talking about? What is it that you have recorded which has not hitherto been known to people, and why, therefore, it is important for people to be reading about the book? Sandeep, over to you.
Thank you, Commodore Kesnur, and thank you to the organizers of the Jaipur Literature Festival and the Brave New World. Thank you, Sanjay Roy, and High Commissioner Doraiswami, and my good friend Commodore Chowdhury. I'm so happy to see you here again this evening, Commodore Chowdhury. It's so good to see you. Srikant, your question on how the book happened, firstly, very quickly, it was a phone call. It just began over a phone call a few years back. A friend of mine in the Navy called me and asked me, do you want to meet Captain Samant? Because he has a book to write. And that was it. That triggered off the book quest. And there I was with him, meeting Captain Samant and Commander Vijay Kapil. Now, I already knew about this operation in a way because almost 25 years back, there was a very, very seminal book called War in the Indian Ocean, written by Vice Admiral Mihir Roy. I read that book. I was a trainee, I'd just begun my career in journalism then. And what struck me was that the first time that this had been written off in India, this unique naval guerrilla operation that Admiral Roy described in very great detail, but he never mentioned the whole story for obvious reasons. I mean, it was a covert war. He wanted to keep the secret. So that book was always in my mind. And I said that, here is a story that needs to be explored, taken further. We need to go and speak with all these great heroes like Commodore Chowdhury who've been mentioned in that. And that opportunity actually presented itself a few years back when I finally met Captain Samant, who wanted to tell his story. And, Operation X is actually, it's a very unique story because it's about a naval guerrilla war of the kind that we haven't seen since the Second World War. Now, in the Second World War, you've seen the Italian Navy use guerrilla warfare. There have been cases of the Viet Cong in the Vietnamese War using guerrilla warfare, but those were primarily combatants. Here you have, for the first time, college students and, literally young men from the colleges and schools in Bangladesh. They were professionals who had fled this genocide that began, the Pakistan Army, triggered off in March of 1971. And they had fled into India. And you had the Indian government recognizing this Bangladeshi government in exile and training the brave men and women who had come there. And this was part of that operation, this larger assistance to the Bangladesh government in exile, training the Mukti Bahini as they were called. The Naval Commando units, as they were called finally, they ended up training something like 400 naval commandos in a special camp in West Bengal. And you won't believe this, it was the battlefield of Plassey, the actual battlefield where Robert Clive defeated Siraj-ud-Daulah. And that was the ground that was chosen to train them, not for any historical reason, but because it was a sugarcane plantation that was available. And you had this very incredible happenstance of Commodore Chowdhury leading this group of Bangladeshi submariners, Bengali submariners from a Pakistani submarine from France. And he, comes all the way back to India. And it's a meeting of minds and causes, and it all manifests in this training camp in West Bengal that's set up in the run-up to the war. And the Indian Navy, which is the smallest of the three services, comes up with this completely radical plan to train these college students, a few ex-servicemen who've quit the Pakistani Navy, and they are shaped into this very unique guerrilla outfit that is trained to attack warships and merchant ships, which are the lifelines of Bangladesh, then East Pakistan. And this campaign began somewhere in August, and you had batches of trained commandos being launched in from West Bengal and Tripura and Meghalaya into East Pakistan to carry out these saboteur missions at very great personal risk to themselves. And men like Commodore Chowdhury, who led one of the largest naval saboteur attacks possibly in maritime history, that one single attack on the night of August 15th, where he's led almost 80 commandos to attack those merchant ships that were lined up.
Sandeep, I'm going to be asking him about that. So
yes, so it's actually a very this is the kind of book that was waiting to be written. Unfortunately, it was never written for various reasons that it was a covert operation, and it was never spoken of very overtly all of these years. And it was all thanks to Captain Samant, my co-author, in fact, who decided that this was the time for it's almost been 50 years after the war, and this was his chance to give it back to society. In a sense, the greatest gift that he gave all of us, I believe, today is the gift of knowledge, the gift of knowing about this very unique operation, that virtually laid the foundation of the Bangladesh Navy. So that's what, in a nutshell, that's what Operation X is all about. Thanks.
Lovely. Thanks. That's a wonderful intro. And for our, I think, viewers, this is the book, as High Commissioner Vikram Doraiswami described it. It's cracker of a book. It's unputdownable, and it's not fiction. It's real history. It's been written at a very rapid pace. And as Sandeep describes it, it's a meeting of many people and ideas and causes. And one of those foremost people in that is Commodore Chowdhury. Commodore Chowdhury, sir, I'm going to come to you. Now, your life is a very dazzling biodata, and lots of that has been mentioned. A lot more remains to be said. Now, your escape from France, that itself is like a fantastic movie that can be made. From Toulon, you went to Sweden, and there you came to Barcelona, you went to Madrid, you escaped from there. That's a brilliant story, wonderfully described. But I'm not going to ask you about that. That I think readers should read it for the thrilling description. I'm going to come to your training camp. First, it begins at the Yamuna River. Then you come to Palashi, as Sandeep has described. And Sandeep's book begins with a prologue of the 1757 war. So you start training there. I want to ask you, sir, what was the sort of chemistry, what was the dynamics when the Mangro 8 met the Indian trainers? Did you have any sense or idea of the scale and the magnitude of the operation you're going to undertake? Chowdhury, sir.
Thank you, Commodore sir. It's a great day, and I'm extremely happy meeting all of you. I feel very proud and honored, especially His Excellency High Commissioner, who inspired me to be present here. And of course, the little Sandy Saab is one of my weakness, that I love him, the way he has focused me, he has brought me today to the world. In fact, he came with a very short notice to Dhaka. He met my son also, but he stayed just few hours. What a brilliant brain he has. He remembered everything. I don't know whether he was carrying any other gadgets to tape down, but it was wonderful the way he brought up the Operation X. It is now going all over the world, and for which I'm in front of you and met you, sir. Well, the beginning, although the time factor, putting all of us in nutshell, the beginning of my defection and finishing with the operation is too big. Believe me. You are watching me virtually. If you would have seen my body language and the tone and the wordings, eye to eye, you would have been hypnotized. It is something unique. I never thought of that day will come an Operation Jackpot of this nature will be led by me. And this Operation Jackpot is the biggest, single biggest operation in the whole world till today. nobody. Sandeep Sahab has mentioned about the Second World War, but those were combatant type. But this one was absolutely a change of life. You carry not the dummy mind, you carry the live mind of 5 kg weight on top of your tummy and swimming across for the target. I remember when I was in the halfway through in the Konnufuli River, one of the most serious river in Bangladesh connected with the Bay of Bengal, heavy tide and current under, at times 6 and above. So we had to swim and swim from the other side of the naval jetty to this side and hit 11 ships. Whatever may be the type of ship, whether the Navy, naval gunboats, or any kind of merchant ship, the whole idea was to block the Pakistanis' lifeline, bringing the logistic support from Pakistan. Indians were really brilliant. They have, almost with the war, they closed down the air route. The only route was open for Pakistan was the ocean route, the river route, the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean via Colombo to reach Chittagong and Khulna. Now, starting from France, I never thought that there will be a chance to defect and join the liberation war. This was the man behind, and today also in honor of Bangabandhu, and it is his year, Bangabandhu's worship, the centenary of Bangabandhu, and that leader has inspired me. He was the great leader in our liberation, in our independence, in our freedom. He was fighting for this particular liberation war for a long time, not in one day. He began long ago. He was watching the behavior of the Pakistanis, how they were doing with us. They have done so much of injustices. They have done so much of atrocities and the killing. It was unbearable. And then he came up with the 7th March speech from Toulon. These few background pictures and the Bangabandhu's speech was keeping me in waiting when the declaration is coming. When the 25th March, the crackdown started, the Pakistani from this Dhaka where I am, they just ran over the innocent civilians and killed indiscriminately our poor people, the roadside people, the children, inhuman, all this killing. I was getting through one band transistor. That was the only means of information to receive by BBC and the Voice of America, for which I was inspired to escape and join the liberation war.
Commodore Saab, you actually given us a fantastic cue, because you're talking in a sense of leaders and leadership. So I'll come back to you about the leadership aspect, because I also want to bring in Sandeep here about the leaders who made difference to the war. So I'll just come back to you with the second part of this question. Sandeep, now some of the people who influenced, in a sense, were key people. Commodore Chowdhury has talked of Bangabandhu there, in our case, our Prime Minister, of course. But specific to the naval operation, there were 3 key leaders. One was Admiral Nanda, the Navy Chief. Other was King Cobra, Captain Mickey Roy, the DNI. who sort of conceived the whole thing, and then you had the camp commandant in Commander Samant. Could you like to sort of describe how these three leaders, Sandeep, and then I will go back to Commodore Chowdhury Saab. Sandeep, you could tell us about how these three leaders made a difference to the operation. What was their role in this?
Well, Srikant, these three people were essentially the inner circle of Operation X. I mean, it was a very, very closely guarded secret, even within the Indian government and the military. The Prime Minister knew of it. The Defense Minister possibly knew of it. The Navy Chief certainly knew of it. And it was so secret that while the DNI, the Director of Naval Intelligence, that's Captain Roy, knew of it, and he was, in fact, very key to planning this whole operation, the Director of Naval Operations, that's Captain Dawson, who later became Navy Chief, he didn't know about this operation. And this was like, it was like an organization within an organization within an organization. You know, it's like a small group of officers and men within the Directorate of Naval Intelligence that even the DNI didn't know about. It was kept that closely guarded, this whole secret. Now, if you look at the three leaders that you mentioned, Admiral Nanda, they had all different motivations, of course. He had this huge chip on his shoulder that he had to prove that the Navy was, well, it was not going to sit out of this war. He was very clear about that 1965 would not get repeated in 1971. So he went into this war planning it all the way, whether it was the missile boat operations or the INS Vikrant. And this one was one of the largest, this was the covert element of this entire naval campaign that he had planned. And for that, he chose Captain M.K. Roy. Now, Captain M.K. Roy is this great naval aviator, the King Cobra, as he was called, because he was a squadron commander of the 310 Squadron. And he was this absolute, the planner of the entire operation. Now, he was the one who actually sat down and did all the planning for the personnel and the equipment, how many people you would need. He chose the key officers, the diving branch, and he did all the running around. So he was the guy on the ground, the head of the naval intelligence thing, and he chose Commander Samant, who was this very, very highly trained submariner. He was one of our first submarine commanding officers trained in the Soviet Union. Again, a very interesting life. I mean, he was trained by the Royal Navy first. He was commissioned in the UK, and then he was the first batch of Indian naval officers to have been trained in the Soviet Union. So in effect, he was trained by three navies, and he was there, looking for a great chance to prove himself. And this operation presented him with that chance. And he was brought in as the man on the ground in Kolkata. So you had Admiral Nanda in Delhi, Captain Roy in Delhi as well, shuttling between Delhi and Kolkata, and you had Captain Samant on the ground there, not only reporting to the naval headquarters, but also to some very, very unusual, larger-than-life characters like Major General J.F.R. Jacob, the Chief of Staff of the Eastern Command, and General Arora. So this was, again, like an operation within an operation, all need-to-know basis. So it was these three men who actually drove this entire operation. And, they were actually... they had a lot to prove. Like I mentioned earlier, the Navy had sat out of all the wars. It had only seen limited action in the 61 war with in Goa, the Goa Liberation Operation, and this was a chance to prove themselves. And Captain Samant told me that after Operation Jackpot in August, which Commodore Chowdhury carried out, there was a sea change in the way the naval team was looked upon. Until then, they were looked upon as interlopers. What's the Navy doing here so far inland? What are they doing? Don't they have anything? They should be out at sea sailing in ships. And after the success of this operation, it was it established the Navy's credentials. And the best tribute to this operation actually came to me from one of my Army friends. An Army scholar who was one of the early readers of the book actually called up to say that, my God, where has this operation been for so many years? We keep getting taught about guerrilla operation, cross-border commando raids where they go 5 kilometers and destroy 2 guns and come back, and that's supposed to be the greatest operation. And here you have the Indian Navy carrying out one of the world's largest coordinated operations with the Bangladeshi freedom fighters, you're hitting 4 ports simultaneously with hundreds of commandos, and the world does not know about it. So that's the kind of reverence with which this operation was being received by a lot of military scholars. So it's an incredible story, and it's the one thing about it. It tells a lot about India, that we might be a very loud and a garrulous nation, but when it comes to keeping secrets, sometimes we do it so incredibly well that even the person next door wouldn't know what's going on. And who else but the Indian Navy, the silent service, to do this operation.
So glad you mentioned Operation Jackpot, because that takes me back to Commodore Chowdhury, sir. Now, this happened on 15th, 16th August. You were the leader, the biggest one on Chittagong, the task force that went to Chittagong. You mentioned in the previous answer how difficult it was to take the limpet mines on your stomach. You also have a connection with Chittagong. I believe that your father was a doctor in Chittagong. So tell us a little about the actual feeling of going and carrying out those attacks. It was the biggest attack. So Jackpot is a turning point, as both the High Commissioner and Sandeep mentioned it. You were the key man in that. So tell our listeners, very briefly, sir, but tell us about Operation Jackpot and how you carried it out.
Thank you once again. But before that, you wanted to know in the beginning, I had no connection with, before the defection, no connection with the Indian Navy or any naval authority. How it came, it was mysterious, but it came. Now, coming to operation, on the 14th August midnight, 71, the day Pakistan was observing their Independence Day. They will be busy and they will be enjoying, and there cannot be any sorts of even smaller operations what to talk about the jackpot. Hardly people get prizes in the jackpot. I got it in the whole world today. I took 60 commandos with me. The Sandeep Saab mentioned about the Vietnamese also. There were few numbers, and the other worlds, they carried out the guerrilla warfare, but with few small group, but not such a large 60 commandos trained by Indian Naval Authority in a camouflaged at Palasi. There is a river Bhagirathi, and the place is so secret, so quiet, and so well marked, and so highly selected. It was well secured, security-wise. We were never allowed. And in less than 3 months' time, we were trained. But before that, we 8 submariners on arrival, most likely 11th April, because we started on 10th April from Madrid. The first man, I must mention the beginner, Sri Bedi, the Charge d'Affaires in Madrid for Indian government. He was the man who began and looked after us. And thereafter, the political asylum, he got our political asylum from Indira Gandhi and the Jagjeevan Ram in 5 to 10 minutes time. What a speed of action. And then all arrangement made by him to fly from Madrid to Bombay and then to Delhi. You have mentioned about the Admiral Roy. I met him, we 8 submariners. We are in fact 9 in the beginning. but one left for London, as he comes from Sylhet, so they have a good connection. But 8 came finally, and then we landed up in Delhi. To cut short, there I met the man, the Gestapo chief, Captain Roy, and his son is with gray hair till neck portion today. He is the man who has invited me. I'm very happy. He's very kind. He said, if the COVID was not there, definitely I would have been in Pink City, Jaipur. I must congratulate the JLF and for their invitation. My best wishes in this event. Now, the brainchild of this operation Jackpot were born in Delhi under the leadership of Captain Roy. But we have not met, we have not known about him. But Admiral Nanda came twice by helicopter to visit us at Palasi. Regarding those days, Commander Samanta was still commander, but after the liberation, I think he became captain and the naval advisor to the Bangladesh Navy. But I never met him much. At Palasi, he came once or twice in uniform, short, and the stocking those days that we used to put on. He visited, but he was given the coordination. But all this planning today, I appreciate like anything, what a plan. That they blocked, India blocked air route, now they wanted to block the sea route. And they decided, they asked, having us in Delhi, what we want to do. We came up spontaneously. We have not come to stay in India and live in the 5-star or 7-star or comfortable hotels. We want to go immediately, send us to the freedom struggle and let us join the freedom fighters. Freedom fighter comes once, never twice. We want to join and fight against the enemy. This has stricken the Captain Roy and the team. The other people, those who were with him, not known till today. But then they decided to do this suicidal operation for blocking the Pakistanis' logistic support by sinking ships. And they were thinking and thought about us. And we were taken immediately and trained us and brought us to the level of instructor, commandos instructor, by giving training in Jamuna River secretly in Delhi, being in Delhi. Possibly it began 20th April or maybe little later, but we did it in 15 days time. We finished our swimming with a pair of fins, but not any apparatus. And then we used to go to Qutub Minar for demolition. So we became expert in swimming and also demolition. So I can do not only the frogman commando attack, also I can do the guerrilla warfare.
So that's wonderful, sir. I'm just briefly pause here. So I'll link this with another question to Sandeep, and then we will go to some things that perhaps both of you can answer together for me. Sandeep, sir mentioned, and he mentioned about the very Spartan conditions and their inspiration not to live a 5-star life, but go straight into freedom. Now, your second tier in the camp in Yamuna and Palashi actually consisted of such an ensemble cast of people. Below Samant, there were people like Samir Das, there were Aku Roy, there was Kapil, there were so many people, and later you had the Raizadas, the Mittars, you had Chiman Singh the Great, you had Petty Officer Dole. Now, my point is, these people lived in very Spartan conditions. They established a camp, they trained. But how did you, when you look at it and you do the story, it's like a huge, spectacular screen where so many characters come together to play. So very briefly, because I've just been given a cue that we get audience questions in a couple of minutes. In a couple of minutes, you tell me, and then I'll go to both of you, as to how did this second tier of leadership and trainers play out, and how did they perform their part so magnificently? And then we will have some questions for both of you together.
So, Srikant, ideally, you would have wanted to have a Marine Commando wing to train the naval guerrillas, but the Navy didn't have it. So they improvised. The next best thing they did was to reach out to the diving branch. And you had a very small, nascent diving branch then in the Indian Navy. They considered themselves, the stepchildren, the Cinderella service of the Cinderella service, if you can call it that. And they were given this chance of training the Bangladeshi freedom fighters, and they had to, get the logistics from the Indian Army and the tentage, for instance. So that was something that they were completely at sea about, and they had to set up these tents over there on the battlefield of Plassey. They led very Spartan lives. So, in fact, one of the crew there was telling me that it was like being out on a ship on an endless patrol, and you never know when you're coming back home. You're completely cut off. Your family doesn't know where you're, because obviously it's a secret operation. You have no mail, there's no entertainment, and there are intelligence people in the camp who are carefully watching everyone, screening people there. So it was a kind of a very cut off kind of existence, and this is an operation that the Navy had never undertaken, but it just plunged into it headlong. And in a matter of months, they had, as Commodore Chowdhury mentioned, they had trained over 400 naval commandos. And it's remarkable that this camp over there, despite all those, Spartan, the camp that they had converted it into something like an assembly line to, churn out naval commandos. And it's interesting because you had a sugarcane mill over there, which was defunct. And the sugarcane field, that is the Plassey, was actually this, the plantation that the sugarcane had been harvested, and you had the naval commandos there. Now that was the new crop that was being grown there, if you can call it that, in 1971. So it's a remarkable operation and done in complete secrecy. And when the operation ended, they just packed up their tents and camps, and the personnel just melted back into the service. Nobody even knew what had happened there. That was, to my mind, the greatest thing of this operation, keeping it secret for almost half a century.
I like the way you described it, a harvest. You sort of created a harvest of naval commandos and then disappeared without a trace. I think we're ready for audience questions now, but I think there are not too many, so we could continue.
Commodore Kesnur, I've asked my colleagues to hold the questions. You continue, because this is a fascinating conversation, so please continue.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Sanjay. I too am thankful to you. I think it's a fascinating conversation. So Commodore Chowdhury, sir, to go back to you, you are describing your sort of chemistry. You began with the Yamuna. You learned how to swim, be a diver, as well as be a saboteur. Now, let's shift the action back to Palashi and back to your attack on the 15th of August, Operation Jackpot, which is kind of central. That was the biggest destruction. So could you focus a little bit on Jackpot and tell us more on that?
Most certainly, sir. So I'm back again. The people who trained us in Jamuna and the Qutub Minar areas, I still do not know them. I don't remember a single. I only remember Captain who became Admiral Roy, who came and met in Delhi. It is his plan. Here, initially, they wanted to do the operation that you see today the Operation Jackpot, initially they thought they will do this blowing up ships with these 8 submariners only, because the requirement was such. They knew what is happening in the war field, how to block the 1,200 miles away, the enemy coming and grabbing this land and killing the people, how to stop them. They were thinking the requirement, 26th March, the liberation started, and they wanted to finish it in April. But then they realized if these 8 submariners are killed, they will not get the second Navy one like this. Those who are already trained, over 10 years experience of submarine service and various services. As such, they decided, as the Sandeep Sir was mentioning about 400, initially they wanted to train 500 commandos, but they could not. Up to our selection and immediate, departure for the operation, they had to finish it in less than 3 months' time. They could do only 300, but the rest came, another 200, and then finally the plan was for 1,000. Anyway, in the meantime, then they decided to recruit the Bangladeshis and make these 8 submariners as their leader, as their instructor. Now, after finishing our training in Delhi, on 21st May 1971, Naval Commando Camp was open at Palasi. There I have not seen Admiral Roy coming, but Captain Samanta was there. But initially, the late Lieutenant Commander Martis, and then our Commander Kapil was also there. He was lieutenant those days, and Lieutenant Das, and the other divers specialist Nana Booj, then the Chaman Singh, and then the many others. They were really great, helpful instructor. They were so devoted. They trained from 21st May to June, July, and 1st August, I was picked up as a leader for the Chittagong operation with 60 commandos for Agartala. And I was taken by most probably Air Force plane. When I boarded, the last man, suddenly a tall with turban, coming and just tapping my back on the aisle, and it was General Arora. How are you? I never met him. I never knew him. So in this operation, the Eastern Command was also in picture, but we had no knowledge because this was something so secret. And secretly, that is why the secret brought success. Such a success. There are many things to dig out from this particular operations, that the Indian naval people, how they came in our, assistance for training.
Wonderful.
General Arora just tapped and asked me, whispered, do you know your D-Day? See, this is 1st August, I remember. Few things I still remember, my computer is very strong. So I said, no, sir, I don't know. Because those days, these gadgets of, in a second, you brought me, Zoom me, you are connecting me with the mobiles. It wasn't there. How we will communicate? When I will do the operation? The name was not known even, Operation Jackpot. Because when I'm going for the operation, I'm likely not to, I'm not coming there. It may happen, I may not come back. Not a single, because the operation was such. You are carrying live mine and you have to go 72 miles away from Agartala to reach Chittagong and do the ship sinking and come back. It was just not possible humanly, but we made it.
Sir, wonderful, wonderful. On that point, I mean, like you said, you made it. And it is that story that Sandeep describes. I've just been told by the organizers, we've got last couple of minutes. So Sandeep, let me go back to you with what might be the last question, which is, as Chowdhury sir said, and he's talked of some fascinating detail, like General Arora sort of tapping his shoulders, like the fact that there were actually 9 people and not 8. I mean, even I read the book, but I didn't realize that or know that. Now, your book actually is full of these very wonderful small nuggets. You go in scale. There's that lovely piece where you talk of Commander Samant maintaining accounts so that after the operation, he has to actually submit. After the biggest covert operation, he has to submit accounts of how he spent his money. This is fascinating detail that you fill in some of the book. You bring in about the soluble plug. Now, just tell us a little about those little tiny ingredients that Commodore Chowdhury talked about, and you found those little ingredients that make for such an appetizing read, and why people should sort of grab your book. What were the little things that you found that were so interesting? Maybe the Force Alpha, for example, or the Riverine Battle. Just tell us some of the things that have not been covered so far before we end this conversation.
Well, Srikant, it's a very unusual operation. Lots of nuggets and a lot of improvisation. Like the one thing that you mentioned was the soluble plug, and that's a key plot device in the book where the naval engineers develop this soluble plug, and they're pretty sure that it's going to work. But then they realize that the time that it's going to be in the water, it could actually endanger the life of the naval commandos, Commodore Chowdhury's commandos. And so then they were racking their brains and they were kind of trying to find out what to do about it. And then suddenly, out of the blue, someone comes up with a solution there in the camp saying that, let's put a condom around this. And so something as simple as that, the condom. Now they start. It so happens that there's this factory in Trivandrum that's set up because of the family planning drive that picks up in the late 60s, and this factory in Trivandrum starts supplying the condoms to this, this camp. And part of the issue to the naval commandos, what they're given is, of course, the limpet mines, submachine guns, some rounds of ammunition, the fuses that trigger off the mines, and they're given this large supply of condoms, which they're supposed to wrap the soluble plug in. So it's little things like that, improvisations like that, be it the soluble plug, the condoms, little things like using radio to communicate coded signals. It was literally everyone was thinking on their feet. I don't think they waited for the perfect moment or, the perfect time or the perfect equipment. They were just going about improvising things, like, little things like they didn't have rubber fins, the rubber fins and the diver's knives. And it so happened that there was an officer who had just left the Navy from the diving branch again, would set up shop in Kolkata, and he started supplying these, the knives and fins. So it was all these little things that actually came up and, made up this big operation. So it's a tribute to the Indian Navy's out of the box thinking, if you ask me. If they didn't wait for the perfect thing of, having all these things falling into place or the equipment, it's just they put the right people, at the right jobs to just get the things done. They got the best and the brightest to come up with this, this operation, and everything fell through. And all those details that you mentioned, all those little things are what they're like the spices in this whole story. And none of it, I didn't create any of it. It was all there, And in fact, I had to double check. Some of them were, too good to be true. Some of those little nuggets. So that's what Operation X essentially is all about. It's all this thing coming together to make this incredible story of human courage, fortitude, and this one of the greatest untold stories until now.
Wonderful. I mean, you could have this small subsets called how a factory in Trivandrum played a big role in the 71 war. So, but ladies and gentlemen, you'll agree it's been a fascinating discussion. I'm sure you would have wanted to do much more. I would have wanted to converse with both of them. Sandeep, fantastic historian, great raconteur, and Commodore Chowdhury, war hero, Bir Uttam, Bir Vikram, a great person. I'm sure this has, sort of brought in huge amount of desire for you to go and buy the book. Do so right now and read it. It's a fascinating read.
But I must speak few words about our Bengali naval commandos who turned to naval commandos from the student life, from different life, coming and joining the freedom struggle, the way we have chosen and selected and brought them in to become a naval commando. What a spirit, what a courage, what a dedication. I must say, my heads off. And they were also, you cannot imagine the way they love us. They still at this age, everyone is most probably 7 and above. I mean, 7 means 70 and above.
Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. So you said it right. Hats off, our salute to them. As our High Commissioner also said, this is a recognition that it is a liberation struggle by the Bangladesh people. Salute all those naval commandos. Thank you for a wonderful session, my co-panelists. Sanjay, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commodore Kesnur. Thank you, Commodore Chowdhury. And thank you, Sandeep Unnithan. As you said, what a great feat of great fortitude, what great battle. And there's so much more to be discussed and to be discovered, not just on Operation X, but during the liberation war of Bangladesh, which both countries participated in and fought side by side, shoulder to shoulder. Thank you, Sandeep Unnithan, for bringing the story to life, a story that was lost, I think, or hidden or not told for over 50 years.
But yes, you have but you have not heard the communication with the naval commandos, whether we are alive or we have reached the target, or we have done the operation, or we are coming back. You still do not know. The two songs played by the Kolkata radio station.
All India radio station. Absolutely. Yes. But I think our readers need to discover that by reading Operation X, by looking at the way Commodore Chowdhury was one of the heroes, as we know, celebrated heroes, along with so many other people. Many of them have passed on, including Admiral Mickey Roy, but so many are still alive. So do pick up the book. It is a celebration, as Sandeep Unnithan said, of the greatest and the biggest covert operation, which put many people, including the United States of America, to shame at that point of time.
I must mention one thing, sir, to you. After my operation, when I was returning, still in torn lungi, torn shirts, because I went like that. It wasn't with my 31 pair of shoe with the calendar, not at all. In France, it was barefooted. When I came to 9th Theatre and met the General Usmani, he was a small man sitting in a handle chair. When he saw me, he literally jumped and touched the roof. He said, "How could you do it?" and hugged me. He was not releasing me. How could you do it? I said, this is called dedication. This is called willpower. This is called love and affection for the people, for the country, under the leadership of Bongo.
Commodore Chowdhury, it's also called vision. You had the vision of defecting while you were in France. And that defection is an incredible story that all of us will read about. Thank you all for watching and being such a great audience. We hope you enjoyed this conversation and will log back on 7th of December at 7:30 p.m. for our next session from the JLF Brave New World Voices of Faith series. Stay well, stay masked. Good night. Remember, order up Sandeep Unnithan's Operation X, and wishing everybody on the occasion of the Indian Navy Day 2020 best wishes. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.